Welcome back to Fair's Fair! It's been a while. Since we last met, the world has had at least a dozen apocalypse movie setups, and more importantly, Kason has added more C's to her thick and proved she's just as badass offline as she is online. Totally worth the end of the world, by the way. But today I have something new, and probably not going to be very common. Fixing a character, specifically Rey Palpatine. This is a video I wasn't even sure I was going to make, as it's a bit hard to grasp for me and the viewer. Basically, I've given myself a set period of time to examine the character in question, then identify the key issues and core pieces of what makes the character tick. Then I check their arc to see where improvements can or should be made. I hear you typing. But there is a character worth salvaging in Rey. There are parts of her story that I wouldn't dare change. There are aspects of her that I feel that the movies gutted or represented wrong that were good setups worth keeping. While I'll admit that Finn had much better internal conflict and setup as the main character, we won't be sidelining her. Here in my hypothetical rewrite, we're acting under the assumption that Rey is our main character and she will remain Sheev's granddaughter. As for why I'm doing this, well, partly because it's a good thought exercise, partly because I said I would on Twitter where only really smart people can follow me, so that kind of locked me in, and partly because if I can come up with a more consistent character based only on the final product, then they, with all their resources, should have been able to figure out these flaws. I want to see if I can make a better outline than the final one was. Something we'll get into is that the final one very much felt like an outline in that the character felt kind of hollow. We're going to see if we can fix that. This is where we're going to hit our first hurdle. In order to make a better structure, we're going to have to assume changes to the characters. The overall plot will also be more vague in our version, and have some changes in it as well. Though if we were to flesh this out, we'd likely have to tweak everything as the whole of the media matters. We're also going to have to throw out large portions of the second movie and the third one entirely. They're jarring shifts and contradictions as the directors tried to simultaneously undermine the originals and each other have made the perfect storm of plot holes, contrivances, and just downright nonsense that there was almost no way that the two versions of where the story was going could mesh. I get that JJ got a raw deal after the cinematic malpractice that was The Last Jedi, but it got so bad that he literally had to gaslight the audience to try and get his story back on track.
I never lied to you.
Yeah, you fucking did, buddy, because this...
Your parents were no one. They chose to be.
Isn't what you said at all. You said...
They're filthy junk traders who sold you off for drinking money. The dead in a pauper's grave in the Jakku desert. You have no place in this story. You come from nothing. You're nothing.
Which isn't the same thing in any way, shape, or form. It's not even true in spirit like this was.
You told me Vader betrayed and murdered my father.
Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He ceased to be Anakin Skywalker and became Darth Vader. When that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed. So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
And it didn't serve any purpose like that lie did. It actually hurt your goals, Kylo. But he was almost a different character in every movie, so maybe it was some kind of meta-commentary on the future of undiagnosed dissociative identity disorder. He also claimed that they were in a pauper's grave on Jakku, yet Rey remembers them leaving in a ship. That was, like, a really important memory for her, but I guess she has memory issues, and forgot her memory, and then forgot what he actually said so they could have a big reveal in Rise of Neurological Disorders. Though before we start this pseudo fanfiction, I want to address the major gripes I had with her character. As a character, her place in the character web was just yes. Her interplay with Finn dropped character development very quickly. She didn't have much with Poe. She had like 3 scenes with Luke and Leia. They literally slapped Deus Ex Connectica between her and Kylo in the form of the Force. But interactions are a two-way street. None of the character web in these movies is any good, so again, tweaking Rey isn't going to fix them. Finn left the First Order due to the trauma of the battlefield. He's acutely aware that stormtroopers are people, yet he slaughters them 2 scenes later. The death of one of his comrades was a major trigger, but he and Poe never addressed the fact that Poe's the one who killed that man in front of him. And when it comes to Rey, the movies just tell us that Rey's important and skilled despite not developing that on screen. The character web is the interactions, and they are deeply flawed. Like I said, we're not going to be fleshing out everything. We're going to be focusing on her arc, internal and external needs. I really don't have time to flesh out every character in this movie. I hear her arc is reconciling with the dark in her past, but that doesn't line up as she didn't really get any shame from that. No one, blamed her for that. I mean, she stole Luke's whole origin, yet he never had any guilt from his. Frankly, it would seem that she didn't really have a consistent arc other than don't be evil, which would be fine if she didn't regularly surpass temptation and 180 from evil all the time with ease. Not to mention, since we don't really know who she is as a character or what she wants to achieve other than find her family, there doesn't seem to be a great conflict here. So it would appear that she doesn't have a real arc, as her path was right on the money from the start, but an arc is usually based on character needs, so what are those? An external need or goal is a goal that the character is aware of, a conscious desire. It could be money, freedom, escape from a situation, a desire to be part of something, or any desire that the character may or may not actually need. The internal need is something that the character is vaguely aware of or completely unaware of, a need of internal nature. Become a better person, don't get hung up on past mistakes, move past your biases, think ahead, learn to trust others, be patient, appreciate what you have. Anything that the character needs to move towards that they aren't able to achieve due to internal conflict. This is where Rey truly falls apart. She's cardboard for so much of these movies. She's off on her own so much that an internal need of accepting a found family doesn't help much unless it's Kylo, since we spend more time with him than the others, but his last name is Solo. So is it letting go of her family? Well, that was thrown out in The Last Jedi, then awkwardly pasted back in Rise of Skywalker. So it doesn't really line up. This resulted in an incredibly flat character trying to remake and rehash the same arc twice. Her dialogue is expositional, her interactions are mostly surface level, the plot conveniently drops in her lap half the time, and she never seems to gain any detriments to balance out her benefits. That last issue we have here is that she has so many goddamn benefits that she eclipses all of the other characters. Her only limitation is that she can't physically be in two places at once. That was literally Poe's issue in the third movie. No, being a singular entity doesn't count as a detriment to a human character. The others lost their roles that she didn't have as well. Finn was inside knowledge, but only when the plot needed to retroactively justify what was on screen already. Oh look, battering ram cannon. Good thing you knew about that. Probably should have told us about it earlier, but then again, the Empire probably should have dropped it close enough that they didn't have to use crawlers to drag it forward. Oh hey, Starkiller base. Maybe someone would have wanted to have known about that. Oh hey, the ability for the First Order to track people through hyperspace. Nope. No one on board this ship, you should have fucking told about that. Then there's Poe, who was supposedly the best pilot, which was very underutilized except for one or two scenes, and apparently Rey is just as good, so he needed more than that. They had some good setups to these characters, but never committed to development. But we're focusing on Rey. To start, God, 2 pages of notes in and I'm starting. But to start, the lore we're working with. We have to change the plot as all things are connected and the plot is too broken for proper characters or stakes. We won't be going into detail, but a framework with similar beats is in order for comparison. The basic rundown is as such. We're still following the map quest, but instead of a super mega ultra Death Star, we'll have a large repair, refit, and refuel station with heavy shielding and decent weaponry. Finn will mention that it can supply way more than a Star Destroyer would ever need. This will tie in with the third movie as a quick fix station for their Death Star destroyers. And we don't have all the plot holes that Starkiller Base created. We'll have a loyal Sith alchemist instead of Palps. This will mean that we can have finality instead of Palpatine again, as it was pretty clear he was supposed to be dead. Bonus points for not robbing the original trilogy of their victory. The Alchemist was using old Palp parts to try and resurrect the old dude and wound up with Force-capable freaks. Snoke. He would appear in red robes, always in communicators. This will let The Last Jedi have its cake and eat it too. They can kill the gold robe Snoke and then tease with the red one appearing at the end of the movie. The red robe one is the best result and the gold was a lesser, less stable one. Rey will learn throughout the story that the alchemist has essentially become a servant of his own creations, and the seeking of her can tie in as her cells may help reconstruct the genetic code of the Snokes to make the results less random. Kylo will want her to join him to rule, as is her blood right, and the Snokes will want a stable army of made-to-order Force users. Rey's interaction with the plot has to do with her desire for family and struggling with her obsession with the past. She can even have a Disney trademark style line near the end where the Sith alchemist says the dark side and Palpatine is her family. Then she could get a comeback of, no, it's my history. I found my family. Cheesy as it is, she would have the end to her arc, from perpetually hung up on her parents and family of the past to moving on to find a family bound by love and mutual respect. The need to let go of the past family of death, evil, and emptiness that she had let hold her back for so long, and embrace others to forge a family. Accepting that her parents of before are gone and she doesn't have to waste her life waiting for, or bowing to, the past at the expense of her future. But a payoff is nothing if it's unearned, and we haven't earned this one yet in our new Rey. So far, we've just decided that these changes happened without setting them up, something we have in common with the original script of the sequels. Let's see if we can fix that. To start out in episode 7, right where she was introduced, I would like to change nothing. No, for real, the setup on her character before Finn arrived and for large parts after, up to when they left Jakku, was great. They set up skills by showing her scavenging. She's shown to care about others, including a droid, and is willing to stand up for them. She's also not afraid of a bit of violence for others, then insists that the droid she saved not follow her and is worn down to letting it stay just for the night. So she's kind, but distrusting and independent. With all those tally marks waiting for her parents, it makes sense she would avoid getting attached to anyone. We see her get offered some rations that seem disappointing for what she collected, hinting that pickings are getting slim, which might contribute to her wanting to leave the planet or having a drive to profit. This shortage is reinforced by the TIE fighters that went down and the scavengers swarming the parts before they've even stopped moving. The good parts are first come, first serve, and they don't care who the salvage comes from. The bodies in the cockpit literally aren't even cold and they're already trying to rip these things for parts. We see her cleaning a part and has a moment of dread when she looks at a much older woman doing the same thing. The expression on her face shows her realization that she could very well end up spending her whole life here, and the thought upsets or even scares her. I have no idea what went wrong later though. What even is this expression? It looks like a combination of trying to have a reasonable debate on Twitter and the after effects of broccoli ghost pepper tacos. But anyone who wants to claim that Daisy Ridley can't act has clearly lost sight of the early movie, because she has some genuine moments in there. Then of course she gets tempted by a massive payout for the droid she found and seems to seriously consider it, but can't. Even with massive gain, she can't sell someone out, possibly because she remembers being left behind herself. She also fights some thugs with her staff, so she can fight a bit, but most importantly, she takes a punch in the 2v1 and scrapes out the victory due to having a weapon. She's not defenseless, but isn't some martial arts goddess. Unlike the movies, we're going to hold on to that for later instead of forgetting it immediately. Then her encounter with Finn. Still good. He grabs her arm and she, being very independent and distrusting, gets upset at being led around. She learns later that he was trying to help, so she at least knows why he did it. But she's still not okay with being led around. I mean, it is her home, so she would know the way around better than he does, and that was displayed by her finding a shortcut to get around him, possibly through more open pathways that allowed her to sprint ahead and knock him down earlier. They both get thrown to the ground in an explosion, and she crawls over to double check if he's okay, which is consistent with who she is. But then he sits up and asks if she's okay. Rey is visibly taken aback by this. He was just thrown by an airstrike and his first concern was her. This flies right in the face of what she assumes from people. But the point is that they set all of this up without having to spell it out. They didn't have to explain it to us. They didn't have to sit us down and have character exposition. This was all done so well. So what the fuck happened? The movie had its fair share of flaws already at that point, but she genuinely was a character at this point. So we're keeping all of those events. Now for her first established flaw in our version. Once on board the Falcon, Finn will ask, "Do you know how to fly?" She'll say, "I know how," and head for the pilot seat. It makes sense she'd know what the buttons in a cockpit do. She rips ships for a living. But once the dogfight begins, she heads for the ship graveyard to try and lose the ties. Though for us, she's going to be clipping bits of metal and tearing bits off of the ship. Her muttering about the paths they're taking along the way, ending in them clipping a large strut and crashing into the sand. Their sudden stop will send the last tie flying past them, and Finn will take the shot. Now, why are we having her crash here? It's because she's never flown before. She has no way to have known how to do it well. Her skills lie elsewhere, and the plot very rarely requires her to fly. If we give her that skill now, then we have to ask two questions. Why not utilize the God Pilot Lady more? And what is she bad at if the Force can just make everyone great at whatever they're doing, even though it's their first time?
That's not how the Force works.
Finn will then question, "I thought you said you could fly." Remember, his last pilot was the best one in the Resistance. Before that, he likely was a gunner only for Empire trained pilots. He's got a skewed view of how good a pilot should be. She'll quip back, "I said I knew how, and I do. I never said I'd done it before." He'll take a breath and realize that knowing how is still a step up from him and concede with, "Right, good flying." Toned almost like an apology. She'd give an accepting nod and a thank you, and then they'll decide to get off the ground as there's no way there aren't more on the way. Her flaw here is not just a lack of piloting skills, but also her fierce independence, making her downplay how much out of her depth she is so as to not appear weak. Something she may have picked up on Jakku that isn't really a good way to act in a group where more than one person is on the line. She'll accept the help of others more and more throughout the story, being part of a plan rather than going it alone. But those are plot details I'll be probably skimming over. Just remember that the character needs them and pretend they're there. After all, there's plenty of people pretending that there are explanations for the plot holes in the story already. Might as well do a little bit more while we're here. So Rey will be adding patches as they're moving upwards. Then when stopped up there, they're immediately shot down by Kylo's Star Destroyer. Oh, wait. I forgot that the movie forgot there was supposed to be a Star Destroyer just over Jakku. A little weird that they forgot the Star Destroyer up there, considering Kylo and Hux were on it, but I digress. We believe in object permanence on this channel, so we'll have the Star Destroyer continue its existence, even though it's been over 2 minutes since we saw it last. Trust me, it still exists. Instead, they take off to get the droid away and run into the Star Destroyer. The droid offers some coordinates, and she decides that anywhere is better than there. An under-fire convo will feature Finn asking if they'll make the jump, and she'll admit that they might get one. After all, they did just crash. But the alternative is death, so the decision is made regardless of her desire to stay and wait for her parents. This is a hard decision to trust the droid, and it's one that has a lot of pressure to it as there's a very real chance that this is a one-way journey, and she wants to stay on Jakku. This will feed some later desperation to return, as she and Finn both don't have a reason to join the Resistance yet. He just wants to escape the First Order, and her goals are completely unaffected by who controls the galaxy. BB-8 has a mission and pre-calculated coordinates, so they're the navigator. They'll make the jump, lots of sparks, and drop out short of their goal. We'll move the conversation between Finn and BB-8 to here while floating in open space. Then we can have Han come in with believability. BB-8 was taking them to a rebellion listening post, but they fell short. The post picked them up on their sensors and recognized the ship, so they called Han. Since Rey recognizes him for his exploits as a smuggler, she'll have that hero worship thing like the original, but with a bad first impression because his ship, being kind of fucked up and all. She would of course want to endear herself to him after that. But instead of the stupid ripping of components out of the wall, she'll suggest a substitute from the freighter that he's flying. We can still have that bit where she tried to endear herself by explaining a solution she came up with and feels let down due to his unenthusiastic response.
What'd you do?
I bypassed the compressor.
Huh.
Move.
Only now it goes like this. Rey suggests cannibalizing less vital parts from the larger freighter to get the Falcon flying again. Han questions if these parts would actually work, then Rey responds along the lines of, for a while at least, we'll just need to bend some things. Han will give his huh that he gave in the cockpit before and says, Chewie, go help her bend things. This has the same bonding effect of Han recognizing her useful skills without damaging his character at the same time. It's also something she might actually know. You all saw how fast the scavengers swarmed on Jakku. You would need to know the most basic makeups of ships to know what to go for first. Consider what's worth the most. How easy is it to access? Would it be damaged? How heavy is it? Would it be smarter to go for many easy-to-get cheaper parts or the hard-to-get expensive parts? It makes sense that she would have basic understanding of ship designs and how they work, rather than the actual script where she had clear knowledge of alterations made by someone else in a ship she had no reason to have ever entered and should have recognized as Han's ship if she had extensive knowledge of it. It's the ship equivalent of a heavily modified 18-wheeler that shot Darth Vader. It should be famous. And if people want to, we can even keep the scene with the natural predator of Japanese schoolgirls by saying that Han took a detour from the job he was on. The action scenes can also involve her resourcefulness more, and since Chewie was with her, she can bring him to Han after injury, suffering some damage herself. Han would then offer an almost verbal reward in the form of, "Good job, kid. You've got good instincts." A recognition she likely doesn't get often, and it would mean a lot coming from him. Jumping ahead to the bar, we are going to keep other bits of the original. We're going to keep her awe-filled reaction to the green of the world. This will feed Han's desire to keep her from wasting her talent and life on Jakku. Also, the Rey in our version can't swim because she has no reason to swim, so we're going to avoid dropping her into water. Han will give her the blaster just like in the original and has to correct her when she accidentally points it at him. Remember, she doesn't know how to shoot. And again, unlike the actual movies, we're going to hold on to this development. We'll also keep the moment where Han suggests she hang around because Chewie likes her, but she initially denies because she wants to get back to Jakku and wait for her parents. Remember, that's still her goal, and here, he'll ask how long she's been waiting, and she's going to say. This will be where she first seems to really question her goal as she sees Han's reaction to the long time that she's waited. He will know 100% right away that her parents aren't coming back, and his face will show it. But she's not ready for that, and it's been her drive forward her whole memorable life. Han, not being a talk about your feelings guy, will let it sit until later. We continue into the bar where Han will go looking for parts from small orange exposition prop number 573. I could try adding something to her character, but the original writers didn't, and I'm 5 pages into a script that isn't even half over, so fuck you. On the way, he tells Rey that she might as well let him bring her back, as he could get her some money from the rebellion for finding his ship. This isn't why he's doing it, though. He knows that she'd be going back to grow old and die alone, waiting for people who will never come. Han may be cold sometimes, but he's not stupid, and he's not a monster. And after having given his child to a temple that later resulted in him losing his child, well, spiritually, he's considerably more likely to empathize with the idea of an abandoned child waiting for her parents. He's trying to keep her off-world in the hopes she'll come off her delusion on her own. And of course she could use the resources, so she has reason to accept his offer. Now we have a bona fide reason for her to stick with him, instead of immediately trying to get back to Jakku, because now there is a monetary incentive that would help her survive for considerably longer, given how slim pickings are getting on the planet. Then we get the First Order spy alerting the First Order, only in this version, a Knight of Ren will be sent as well. This will be who Finn fights instead of a single stun baton trooper who just happened to be there. A Knight of Ren wouldn't care much if Finn had a blaster, so it would make actual sense for him to resort to the lightsaber. Though the incident of her being told that her parents aren't coming back would have better impact if Han was there and she sought support from him. Backed into a corner, he'd admit that he knows they aren't coming back. He'd likely point out that she knows that too, and she does. She can't not know that on some level by now. But in the moment, she'd run out of the bar as the attack begins. She's captured after making some poor shots at the troopers. There was no reason to have her be a crack shot in the original, so we won't do that. That was one of the more baffling things that they gave her in the original, as proficiency with a blaster was not important for her in the plot. and she ended up captured anyway, so it's not like it helped her. And in our version, when she's taken to the interrogation room, we're going to have cells to the side, and her personal effects will be in the main room with her. After Kylo fails to mind trick her, she'll ask what he's doing. It would look a bit silly to someone who doesn't know how mind tricks work. Kylo would berate her lack of knowledge, explain that the Force can trick the weak of mind, and suggest that if she feels more helpful later, the First Order could help her hone her latent power, like it helped him. A "just like me" line would be a fitting walkout line after the attempt to regain control of the situation by berating her, and has a personal impact of pointing out a similarity between them after she had called him a monster earlier in the same conversation. Her escape could then be a much simpler command of just telling the stormtrooper not to take her things out of the room and grabbing a tool on the sly to break out from inside the cell. The less complicated command would be more believable for a first-time mind tricker. As a fun side bit, after pulling a part from the wall to open her cell, she could pocket it and then double back for some other small bits with the line, "That's probably worth at least 6 rations." She's a scavenger. The habit of not wanting to leave valuable items behind when they won't slow you down is probably a hard one to break. And remember, she still thinks she's going back to Jakku. Cut forward a ways with the Rebellion getting the info about the refit station from Finn. Remember, our story doesn't have a Starkiller base because it's a full 32 flavors of stupid. They decide to attack, but the Republic isn't going to help them. The Republic can't afford to start a war with what they consider to be a small fractal group, and don't want to be seen as forcefully uniting the galaxy as the Empire rose from similar designs. But the Rebellion doesn't like this base. It's designed for way more ships than they think the First Order has, and Finn says it provides way more power than needed. These bad signs get them out there to destroy the base. It's also not going to be fed by stars, because stars are not just big balls of free energy, they are mass. As in physical, tangible matter. You can't just put it inside a planet. But after escaping, this is where Rey gets to stand out. Knowing they're under attack, she starts sabotaging the station. The shields go down, the Falcon goes in, auxiliary system kicks in, putting the shields back up, and we've achieved the same practical results as the first movie. Han, of course, went in due to feeling responsible for how things got here, and Finn is there because he feels like he doomed her to this by involving her back on Jakku. After meeting up with her, Han makes an offer. Come with him. Work with him on his ship. With the resources of the Rebellion and his smuggler contacts, she has better odds of finding out about her parents. He faces her with the cold hard facts. If they had the ability to come back, they would have by now. And he tacks on, you've seen how much bigger the galaxy is than Jakku. You can't search it alone. This isn't a hard fix, but it'll get her off the rock she was on. So in Han's mind, it's the best option. And this would tie back into her wonder when seeing a forest. He knows she's a fish out of water outside of the desert, and is offering a hand forward into a bigger universe that would help her grow. Then her, Finn, and Han get to bond with her knowledge of what types of systems to break, Finn's knowledge of the layout, Han and Finn's knowledge of Imperial protocol, all working to bring down defenses. We can even have a cute moment where after entering a corridor they had seen a patrol pass by earlier, she's halfway through a line about what to break when Finn and Han pull her to the side as some troopers walk by. Han starts, main corridor patrol. Finn finishes, every 5 minutes. Good bonding, and it's all knowledge they would reasonably have. We've also added a perspective for Rey. She now has reason to believe that staying with the Rebellion might help her goals, even if her goals aren't all in the right direction. We're only 1 movie in, so she doesn't need to be entirely broken of her foolishness yet. Luke wasn't. He was brash and impatient well into the 2nd movie. Her major detriment here is the mental gymnastics she goes through to stand by the idea that she'll see her parents again. Something that should inform her actions, yet in the original, she abandoned that to join the Rebellion, and it's never brought up until she needs to have an emotional reaction to something. Like, did they cut out a scene or something? But she'd go to find Luke, as Leia thinks he could help her find her parents. As for why Rey is going, we'll have Leia say he probably doesn't want to see us given the events, thus implying some issues that need ironing out. This could add weight to his later goodbye to Leia. He could be blaming himself for Han and Leia's breakup, or fear they blame him for losing their son to the dark side after they entrusted Ben to him. But now we're going to the second movie, where the Supremacy is chasing the Rebel fleet and Rey is meeting Luke. Now, the Rebel chase I might be willing to let go. I believe that the hyperspace tracker needs to be somewhere near the ship that jumped. Also, it's possible that due to the speed of hyperspace travel, there is no window of time small enough in hyperspace that they wouldn't overshoot the Rebels and have to go back, giving them a chance to escape while you're not close enough to track them. So slowly accelerating towards them makes sense, as they are only one ship. Oh. Never mind. Hux, why aren't you sending 2 of those ahead, then back to cut them off? Fine, let's pretend they have no other ships with them, because our ticking clock needs to make sense or else there's no stakes. But now Snoke's anger at Hux makes more sense, as Snoke said it was a top priority that they crush the Rebel fleet before they recover from the fight. But Hux left the rest of the First Order fleet elsewhere so that they don't lose a system by appearing weak after that loss. This makes some sense, but he's endangered victory and made a decision that could be considered counter to orders. Snoke knows they're getting a fleet of Death Star destroyers, so he doesn't care about losing a system or 2 now. This wouldn't cost the consistency of Hux's character, and Darth Vader already showed that leaders making poor tactical decisions on their own is frowned upon. When a commander came out of hyperspace too close in an attempt to surprise the Rebels in The Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader had no qualms using the Force to ensure that it didn't happen again.
You have failed me for the last time, Admiral. Captain Piet.
Yes, my lord.
Make ready to land our troops beyond their energy field, then deploy the fleet so that nothing gets off the system. You are in command now, Admiral Piet.
Thank you, Lord Vader.
We'll assume that Hux is more important as a leader, and I just realized I'm fixing the wrong character. There's a lot wrong, it's hard to focus. So Rey will meet the legend, Luke. We're going to have the rise of the Knights of Ren be due to Snoke corrupting Ren. I can get behind a man falling into despair after being hailed as a hero and future of the Jedi, only to have his student betray him and his school burned down. All that praise, hope, past accomplishment, all turned into pressure, and then you screw up literally every aspect of it? That'll fuck you up. That's fine. We'll just casually scrub the premeditated murder stain off his character, and he's almost an okay development from the Luke we knew. That'll have to be good enough, as I'm going to be forgotten by the algorithm if I take much longer on this script, and I never said I was fixing Luke. Her first encounter with him after handing him the lightsaber will be him woefully setting the lightsaber down, symbolically done with it, while still respecting what it was. Sorry, I promise, I'll go back to fixing Rey. Her interactions with him will be more somber, respectful. She's supposed to think he's a legend. The movie showed her demanding and argumentative, and none of it in line with the reverence of a person so great she thought he was a made-up story. She can still be argumentative while respecting who she's talking to. See Luke with Yoda. A good comparison, since that's sort of what Rian Johnson was ripping off. Running over a few times, threw in a deep fryer, ate, and then shat out onto the script. Not that I'm bitter. He would feel her power in the Force, and she, being a very kind person despite where she came from, could convince him to help her so the rebellion could have a Jedi again, even if he isn't up to returning. But her first conversation with him should be to learn what happened. Then she has the long process of learning not to let the past provide unrealistic expectations or become a weight dragging you down. Unfortunately, because I am mostly focusing on Rey, I am not really characterizing anyone else, so effectively she's walking past a bunch of character-shaped mirrors that she's capable of reflecting her own flaws in. Now, it's good to be able to do that as a character, but because I'm not fleshing out any characters beyond her, they are essentially just props for her character in our retelling, which is why this wouldn't make a good script on its own, and why I'm only titling the video Fixing Rey Palpatine. Anyway, Luke could mention that the Force connects people. Now she would become interested, as it could directly relate to her goals. This would be supposedly what Leia was talking about. She would be looking for training in the Force to search for her parents. The added desire to become a Jedi could also come with a desire to be someone her parents could be proud of. Luke, having found love to be a powerful connection that could pull even the most evil out of the dark, would have a reason to think that she would stay good, because Luke knows the value of a loving connection.
If you choose the armor, you'll return to your friend, the Mandalorian. However, you will be giving into attachment to those that you love, and forsaking the way of the Jedi.
I guess we'll scrub emotionless repetition of old Jedi mistakes and amnesia from his own victories out of his character too. Jesus Christ, they can't put this guy on screen without stabbing him in the back. But he also would have to give sound warning that she needs to be prepared for the worst. As she struggles to find relatives, she falls into the dark. Luke might know at this point what her lineage is, or at least have a hint of it, and he would second guess his decision to use family to motivate her. He would end her training for the day so he could meditate on his own. He does now have legitimate concern about her staying in the light, and given his previous failure, he might go back on his commitment to training her. Now with the risk of not being trained, Rey has reason to meditate on her own and has received Force-aided guidance on how to meditate with the Force. This is when she and Kylo first meet, and he could offer to help her find who she's looking for. A nice line like, "I could feel you searching, blindly. I know I'm not who you're looking for, but you'll never find them without guidance. I can give you that." What we have now is a legitimate draw and conflict. She has a reason to work with the rebellion, but that reason is getting shaky, and a reason to work with the Empire has come up. But there's a big difference between not fighting the Empire and helping them. One is passive, the other is active. Her morals and her goals are now in conflict on whether or not to accept Kylo's help. She has no reason to know more than legends, which Luke has shown to be unreliable to put stake in, and for her goals, it doesn't really matter who's in charge of the galaxy. Growing up on Jakku, her life was unaffected by who's in charge. She has no reason to believe her personal life would change with the First Order, Republic, or the for some reason separate faction of the Rebellion, and if the Republic isn't in open conflict with the First Order, why should she assume that they're the same as the Empire? Kylo could also have his own rendition of events, point out that Luke, as the Jedi did, separated him from his parents. The Jedi texts would support this idea and the idea of avoiding attachments. Now Luke looks like a manipulative person. He could then have his speech about the flaws of the Jedi Order. One of the few things I really liked about that movie, by the way.
The legacy of the Jedi is failure. Hypocrisy, hubris. At the height of their powers, they allowed Darth Sidious to rise, create the Empire, and wipe them out.
He would then insist that the dark side isn't the answer and there are many paths to her goals. She would make her decision to go and see Kylo in order to turn him and get the help that she doesn't know if Luke is willing to provide. We all know where she'll end up, but at least there's now a reason why she might be tempted to work with Kylo. Now, I would love to talk about Rey's interactions with Poe from this movie, but he's busy being abused for making objectively correct decisions and then being not told about a plan that they have no reason not to tell him, even at the expense of everyone's lives. I'd also like to build on Finn's relationship to Rey, as he would offer a good counter to the Empire's offer, as he knows all too well what they are about. But unfortunately for most of the movie, he's caught up in a side quest to see if he can have as little to do with the plot as possible. Also, they can lever in some bullshit about war profiteering. And it's not even a theme. There wasn't a deeper narrative about it. No plot integration. It wasn't even something they showed via the construction of the world as the viewer traveled through it. They just said it. War profiteering is bad. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Thanks for your groundbreaking moral revelation. But it's off topic, so I'm docking you points. Then they just leave and never bring it up again, never suggest that things were fixed, and I never stretch things for the rule of 3 in my scripts. But hey, they did destroy part of one casino on one planet. That's pretty much capitalism destroyed right there. Back to Rey in the elevator with Ben, she would try to convince him that there are other ways than the Jedi's old way in the light, that she felt that conflict in him, that she knows he'll turn because of it. But he felt something too. She may not have the knowledge to find her past, but he felt it, and what he saw is why she will be the one to turn. This will play towards her theme of not letting the past control or limit her future, clinging to it. Within reason. And now he's playing off of a concern that Luke had too, which would definitely lead to her concern that it might have some merit. After all, both these people know more about the Force than she does. though he's still dying at the end of our version, mainly because I want him dead, and I'd much rather Adam Driver's acting chops go towards something well written. Here, though, Finn and friends will sabotage the Supremacy's hyperdrive to charge and explode. We won't go into exactly how that works or how they got there, because that would require much more rewriting. We'll be moving faster and vaguer the further from the canon we go, but this movie will be the big jump, as huge parts of it are completely unimportant. To fix those parts, we'd have to fix other characters and add depth to the plot. We aren't even fixing too much of Rey, we're patching some major holes. To truly fix her, we'd have to redraft practically the whole script as the whole story is connected. Anyway, we patch the escape plan where they sneak away to the base as them holding up until the Republic can mobilize and respond to their distress signal, instead of sneaking away. I put it in quotes because, well...
Holdo knew the First Order was tracking our big ship. They're not monitoring for little transports.
So we could slip down to the surface unnoticed and hide till the First Order passes. That could work.
It doesn't matter if they're scanning for small ships, they can fucking see you! Your stupid ass plan hinged on the idea that the spacefaring Last Order hasn't invented the telescope and is unfamiliar with the concept of windows. Which we see later on in this very movie that they actually have invented curved glass. What a fucking surprise! So instead they're trying to run there, and Holdo gives her life using the capital ship to body block the shots aimed at the smaller ships, which they would be shooting at because they can fucking see you with their eyes! Fucking hell, what a stupid plan. A thinking human being wrote that and no one said anything. The human race isn't worth saving. Boom, sabotage, Supremacy starts exploding, Beta Snoke dies. Remember, our plot has more than one. Then Shad breaks into the writing room and beats this scene's fight choreographer to death in a Monty Python-style fourth wall breaking skit and takes over, resulting in us getting an actually rewarding feeling from the choreography of the throne room fight scene. Afterward, Kylo tells her to join him, and she has the moment of debate before Finn comes to get her, grounding her from the high at the end of the battle, and him refusing to leave her behind as the ship is exploding would help build their relationship even more, as this time, there was zero reason for him to be there except for her. A simple line like, "You could have left, I'd have caught up," and then Finn calls back saying, "You took the lead on Jakku. Well, First Order ships are where I'm from." This would help frame how far they've come from the places they started. Some slightly deeper lines could follow him making a light joke about his kidnapping and indoctrination. Maybe, "I'll show you around when we're not on one we're blowing up." Though this would have to be supported as an internal conflict in Finn, which I luckily don't have to write as he's not the one we're fixing. Yay, convenient cop-outs. Everyone goes down to the planet, stuff we aren't fixing happens, but this time Luke survives his super mind trick thing, and they run away as part of the Republic's fleet comes by to back them up. This will be slightly different from the actual movie because in ours, Rey is leaving with Finn, whereas in the actual movie, Rey, well, she left the throne room and she wasn't on the ship that Finn left on, but then she's just in the Falcon later, and... Did I miss a scene? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but how did she get to the Falcon? How did she get off the ship? Did she go back to that pod in the hangar? Was it still there? Like, I kind of thought the hangars all blew up. I don't know, she just kind of appeared in the ship later. I legitimately, like, I watched the Disney Plus version, that should be the complete version. I have legitimately no idea how she got from the Supremacy onto the Millennium Falcon. Anyway, movie ends with Hux apologizing for his failure, and a voice off-screen saying that his failure has not only cost them the rebellion, but also cost a capital ship and allowed the Republic to get involved. He would start the statement, "I thought," only to be force-choked mid-sentence and Snoke's voice comes in. We cut to a red-robed Snoke coming out of the shadows with the line, "My orders should have been your thoughts. Now we'll have to move up our schedule." Then he can kill Hux for slightly more believable reasons. At this point, Finn is all but secured his family, but that just leaves moving past the blood-related one as part of the end of her arc. Going into the third movie, we have Rey's high point of success in her choices and meditating on finding her parents. But the more she focuses on her family, the stronger the pull of the dark. Luke would be there trying to guide her to stay in the light even as she looks into the dark, and he would tell her of his own experience with the dark side in his family, how it didn't make him evil. He would gently try telling her that she wouldn't have been on Jakku so long if there weren't a high chance that she's looking for sad news regarding her parents. After the wins she has made, the idea that her goal could end in finding something bad would be a sobering thought, though not a new one, I'm sure. One of those sad thoughts that you have, but you don't really think about. Like the fact that all of the animals from the Homeward Bound movie are definitely dead. Now Luke has to admit that he sensed the dark in her past before and warns her to brace for it. She would become concerned, asking if that makes her destined for it. Was Kylo right? Luke would tell her that her past doesn't control her. Only she can choose who she is and what to hold on to. Now, I know what you're saying. Fair, you Calipigian Adonis you. Isn't it kind of lazy to have a mentor just straight up say the lesson that the hero needs to learn? And yes it is. But I'm on the top of page 10 of the script, so we're taking shortcuts. No one's paying me for this. Anyway, since her lightsaber was destroyed last movie, we have her dialogue with Luke interrupted by someone letting her know they, quote, got the materials she asked for, with the help of the Republic. This will give us the cutaway for Kylo's side of the story, which we don't care about for this video. Next time we see her after a time cut, she's carrying a new staff. The reveal will be that it's more like a sword staff with the lightsaber on the end. This fits better as a weapon she'd know how to use and offers better leverage that adds believability to her winning fights with a clearly physically stronger foe. Her knowledge of valuable material might play in as Kylo does a downward strike and she blocks it with the staff. There's a moment of pause as he processes that the lightsaber didn't go through it. Then she rotates to club him with the other end and she quips, "Careful, that metal's expensive." Then restrains him for the confrontation that was had on the ruins of the Death Star. This would be supplemented by statements throughout about the value of things and her knowledge of what types of parts are necessary for certain types of ship functions. I don't have time to write all of the dialogue necessary to flesh this out, but it's notable that the original script did not have much in the way of anything that had to do with her actual skills that she would have from being a scavenger. But one option is when Kylo wakes up, she says, "You wouldn't have done well as a scavenger. You gotta know metal like that on sight to get it first. You may have seen my past, but you didn't live it. You can't tell me my future." He then gets his "the dark side is in your blood" moment and tells her that her granddad was skeevy sheevy. She does need another character with a Sith in their history to push against, but Ben isn't the source of her final reflection, nor is Snoke. She'll also need dialogue that shows her struggle with the idea that she comes from the Sith, though on some level her parents' death would be something she already knew about, so letting go of her parents doesn't work as a path for her unless we accept that she's very dense and didn't know. Though she can still shed tears among her friends when she gets back and has a moment to really feel it now that it's confirmed that they are dead. Again, just like the animals from Homeward Bound, definitely dead. Somewhere deep down, you knew it if you thought about it, but it wasn't sad until I pointed it out. Oh, before that, Chewie will be on the ship she blows up. I'm killing Chewie. She needs to fuck up in a way that doesn't facilitate victory, but is actually a fuck-up. She needs to fear the dark side of her powers, so there's some legitimate reason for her to course-correct hard and be concerned about how the dark side might affect her. In the original story, she saves him, but they never really address that her anger could have killed him. They just glaze over it, and it's all okay once they got him back. Guess there's no reason not to use that lightning stuff. Moving on, Luke can have his Yoda pass-on moment right next to his sister, with some reconciliation of their own arcs involving Ben Solo, which we didn't talk about because that's not the video, but it's part of Rey's interaction because everything is connected. Using what she hears here, she'll be able to turn Ben back with the lessons she's learned from the three of them, that is, Rey, Leia, and Luke respectively. This will be proof positive that you can turn back from the dark in your family, something she wants to prove after killing Chewie. Dialogue will need to support this. I'm sure the fans would be incredibly upset with the idea of Chewbacca dying, but quite frankly, it really pisses me off that they made such a massive cop-out, so I just really want him to be dead because he was part of it. And it serves a purpose. Multitasking. Her final reflection will be when she would have been facing Palpatine in the original, but is instead facing the Sith alchemist who made the Snokes. The red-robed Snoke will be shown to basically own the alchemist. Here, Rey will see the truest reflection. Someone who couldn't let go of the past no matter what, who clung to it until it turned rotten in his grasp and ended up literally controlling him. A slave to the past wasting away. This is the moment she gets to realize that she escaped that and has moved beyond it, gaining victories due to learning from her history without clutching it so close that she can't move on. Instead of the original where she threw away every part of who she was before. All of who her grandparent was, and carried none of her useful past forward. She adopted an entirely different drive without a transfer between, and won because of pounds of Palpatine power pushing privilege. Here, she can either claim the name Palpatine as her own, or go as just Rey, to show that she's more about who she will be than what her family was. Her taking Skywalker didn't really make much sense. Luke didn't name anyone after Yoda, nor did he take the name Kenobi, possibly because he saw the future of that name and decided Skywalker isn't that damaged comparatively.
Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?
Now, you see, they let the children live in Kenobi. That's where they went wrong. Point is that Finn and Poe would make a better found family than the Skywalkers would. The original was undercut on the idea that her past didn't define her after 3 movies of victories due majorly to power she inherited from Palpatine. None of it was earned by skills she would have, yet she had dozens of skills just for the sake of it. Most of her plot-related victories were just because of a massive power difference via her bloodline. You can't separate her victories from Sheev in the narrative. It's the driving force that she naturally is great with the Force and lightsabers. Thus her victories felt almost hollow, not helped by her victory being actually hollow since you apparently can just grow a new Palpatine later. Cause, you know, the whole story is connected to the characters. The major damage to her was late first and second movie. She had no real failings or poor fields, yet she stacked skills like a World of Warcraft hotbar. She lost all her own characterization in favor of bland platitudes and rebellion recruitment taglines. Why she decided to join them was almost explained, but they forgot to weigh it against what her personal goals and internal needs were. She became a Swiss Army plot prop instead of a character, a painfully common thing in these movies. I always say John Boyega got robbed, and of every character, his was robbed the most, but pretty much all of these people got robbed of a character. We kind of blitzkrieged the end, but I think we've made a difference to the character in this new outline. But even here, I haven't fully fixed her. Where are the stakes to her failing? What cost was there to her making a mistake other than Chewie? Like in the overarching world, how does she lament these mistakes? The plot didn't have many points for her to fail, and I barely changed the points, so she didn't have these things. Because, you know, everything is connected in a story. You may have noticed me subtly nodding to that in this very, very long script. And I haven't fixed the other characters which affect her. Finn is still all kinds of setup without payoff. Also, an unempathetic monster who cannot see himself in the other stormtroopers but has a heart of gold. Poe, who 200% died on Jakku, then magically teleported to the rebel base cause he's either a wizard or a reptile that can survive in the desert sun unconscious for longer than Finn, then somehow managed to get back to the rebel base first. I also skipped a lot of issues in tone. Why is Finn a comedy relief despite his past? I skipped issues with the plot. Why does the First Order care about the Jedi they know has run away if they should know they have a fucking armada of super ships coming? Should have planned that trilogy out, then your villains would make sense. Why the ever-living fuck did the rebellion give up the search for that Sith hunter that had the McKnifen? That's a MacGuffin knife, by the way. His ship was still on the planet, and they knew that. Did they think he walked off the planet? How about stakes? How the fuck is the First Order seemingly more powerful than the Empire after massive losses? Why aren't the rebels, or at least Leia, part of the Republic? How is the New Republic so weak and small after 30 years? I barely mitigated any of that at all. Also, I gave Rey 2 internal needs of both letting go of the past and the importance of found family, but they're pretty close, so I think it works. With all these things dependent on one another, I would never expect perfection, but internal consistency is the minimum, and they couldn't even do that in these movies.
That's not how the Force works.
I suppose you can just slap some names on props and tell a story about flashing lights with no stakes or consistency, and people can enjoy it if they like that. There's no narrative to fireworks, but they're fun. But you can't expect me to say you told the story well, and you can't expect me to hail your props as relatable characters if they weren't made like that in your story. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think I improved her slightly as was my goal? Did the characters feel as hollow to you as they did to me? Do you feel like you have a deeper appreciation for the writing of characters and how people could be a tad miffed at how it was done in the sequel trilogy compared to better written movies? I definitely cut parts out of this and didn't flesh out all of my points well, as this was getting rather long. Also could have sectioned it better, or at all in some places. I wish I could really dig into this, but it's gone a bit ranty with some of my points being stated rather than argued. But these long videos don't do well in the algorithm and have poor viewer retention, so please like, share, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter to justify the fair's existence, or we will kill them all. And if you don't think that Rey needed fixing, then there is no way you watched the whole video and are already down in the comments being entertainingly angry.